Really, really excited to be here. I'm coming to you live from my basement as well. What's really fun is that this is the basement I started Schema App in with my husband. And so it sort of like feels very 2015 to me that I'm like now back to where we started it. And now people actually care about Schema Markup, like who knew? So let me just go ahead and share my screen, and you should see, if I get nods from Abby, you see my presentation. Excellent. Okay, we're ready to rock and roll. I am quite happy with interruptions. So Abby, I'm going to leave it in your great hands. If people have questions, to go ahead and throw it in the chat. And then Abby, feel free to interrupt me as we go through. I will endeavor to answer any and all questions. And if I can't answer them, then I will get someone smarter than me to get back to you. But what we're going to cover today is schema markup strategy. And then we're going to talk a little bit about connected schema markup. And then I'm actually going to show you, we're doing a big webinar tomorrow on FAQ schema markup. And so I thought I'd kind of preview some of the cool things that we put together for that with this group. Does that sound good? So I always introduce myself with a knowledge graph. And those of you that know me, I've actually updated it for today. So, you guys get to meet my kids for the first time. But I grew up actually at Cisco. So I spent 14 years at Cisco. And I have a technical background. So a couple of you through introductions, we're talking a lot about, let's get nerdy. I'm all up for that. So I have a background in mathematics and engineering. I got to go to MIT. I'm one of the founders of Schema App. I am Canadian. So super excited that Anna's here from Stratford, which is like 40 minutes away from where I live in Guelph, so that's pretty exciting. And I have two kids, Ruth and Garrick, who I also avoided putting to bed tonight by being part of this tonight, so thank you for that parental break. And then I decided to update my job title. Like usually I just introduce myself as a CEO, but lately I've been cook, teacher, cleaner, and event organizer with COVID going on, and so I thought I'd sort of expand sort of the things that keep me busy during my full days. I'll just talk for 1 second about Schema App and then we'll jump on, but really what Schema App is an enterprise solution to do schema markup on all websites, doing all types of schema markup. So I can talk Drupal with you, I'm happy to talk finance, health, you name it, and we can get into those details sort of as we go through. But I'll try to lend all that knowledge as we go through today's agenda. I do like starting with news. It's usually what gets me kind of excited and it allows me to tell some stories. So we'll start with a little bit of news and then we'll dig right into the content. And then I'm going to get into connected content with some basic and advanced examples and then Q&A. And time check, I think we have 45 minutes because we were trying to leave 15 minutes for questions. Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll take as many questions as we have, and then we'll just transfer back into like Q&A and happy hour time. So
super. All right. So feel free again, interrupt me as we go along. But I have nothing else planned tonight. Imagine that. Nowhere to go. So I think one thing that's really fun, and Jeannie sort of mentioned, like she and I have known each other for a long time. Like we've been doing schema markup for a long time. Like we started doing it in about 2014, 2015, mostly because we wanted to figure out like how we could lend our semantic technology knowledge into an applicable world. But the last 2 years have been super, super exciting. So as we left 2019, I was talking about like schema markup taking off. Like we saw the most features, we saw the most releases of schema.org. And then sort of there was like a smattering of like a top trend from Google Webmaster Conference or number 6 of 10 trends that you should be doing in 2020. And then as we've started 2020, we've already seen 6 releases of schema.org. It's like unprecedented. And so, back in 2017, I remember I was at State of Search. It was my first time talking. I met Gary Elish. I'm like, it's going to be this year of schema markup in 2018. And it didn't happen. But folks, 2020, it's happening. It's like the year of schema markup. So I'm super excited you're all here to learn about it. But I'm also excited to lend all the information that I've learned over the years that I've been doing it. And like crazy stuff is happening. Like, the White House recommending everyone adopt Schema Markup. Like we call in for CIOs in order to update their websites using Schema Markup tags. Now, of course, they're talking about COVID-19 special announcement tags, but seriously, like when you're in the business of Schema Markup, like you can't write this stuff. And so, these are the type of things that are happening that I really do think that if there's ever a time to really want to dig into this, now is that time. The other piece of news, a couple just updates, and we sort of spend 365 days a year just doing Schema Markup, whereas all of you have very many different things that you work on. So a couple things, like we did see Schema.org version 7 get accelerated so that it would have the COVID-19 special announcement, COVID testing facilities, as well as some updates to properties for events so that you could say if they're canceled, being done in a new year, rescheduled, or also sort of in a virtual location. Some good news, like the virtual location, the fact that you can now do that and that they're going to show those in features is amazing. And like I shared earlier, and I'll make sure to I'll add it to this slide so it's also there, is that we do have a COVID-19 guide, and Schema App, we're happy to help companies, whoever they are, be able to implement that on their special announcement page. So if there's any help that we can provide, you can reach out to me directly, or to support@schemaapp.com. We're happy to do that as our way of giving back. The other piece that's always been a great debate, if anyone follows me on Twitter, I always share this blog that says using Google Tag Manager for doing Schema Markup is not a bad thing if you know what you're doing, you've optimized JavaScript. But Google finally wrote, an actual guide that was like how to generate structured data with JavaScript and how to implement it properly. So I can win that debate now, and it's sort of like documented somewhere that you all can use as a resource. And so that's something new that's just come out. And then one other piece that we're just super excited about, and then we'll get into strategy, is Google is now publishing updates to their search documentation. And like we've been asking for this for 3 years, but now it's here. So literally, like you can see, even just in the last couple days, they made some specific updates, not all COVID related, but now they're actually telling us when they make changes. And so this is really exciting from an SEO perspective, in that you have a better sense of what's changing and how that might apply, to kind of trigger you to do maintenance or to kind of go make some updates to your Schema Markup. Especially as a technology provider, we were automating this by crawling it and reviewing it on a regular basis, and we just know that that's just going to be that much more up to date and proactive. So lots and lots of things going on, with Google sort of putting a lot of attention on structured data. Oh yeah, one other one. See, like it's just so exciting. This came out just this past week, where they're also sharing data anomalies in Search Console. And a lot of these have to do with like basically outages, or kind of them reporting coverage on a smaller number of pages. Again, these slides will all be shared, and there's links at the bottom, but this was a really interesting one where we've seen some kind of really big changes in what's going on in Search Console, especially in the rich results reports. And so there's some answers as to why now in this document. All right, that's the news. Coming to you live, some good news from Martha and Berkel. All right, let's get into strategy for Schema Markup. Now, I always like to start kind of saying about, the Schema Markup process. And so often, we think like, let's just do Schema Markup, but we really think of it in this kind of circular, iterative way. So we start with strategy being like, what should we optimize? What is the best Schema Markup to use, et cetera. And then we go into authoring. So either we're creating or generating the Schema Markup, we're deploying it, we're getting it on the site. And then we should also be maintaining it. So when we see those changes from Google, or if the content changes, or we see opportunities like we're going to talk about, to get sort of more rich results. And then we also are always reporting on it. So how is it performing? And then some advanced analytics that you can do where you use the Schema Markup to structure your analytics. And then we kind of go back to strategy, because when we learn things in the reports, we kind of want to go back and say like, well, what else could we do? How does that change? And so today we're focusing primarily on strategy, and then I'm going to get a little bit into authoring with regards to how to like make sure you do nested connected markup. The key thing here is it's iterative, and it goes beyond authoring. Okay, so what is Schema Markup strategy? I often like to always take the 10,000 foot step on this to say it's the process of figuring out the content the business needs to be understood by search engines in order to meet their goals. And the reason I like to start with the business instead of just like what are the features we're going after is it actually gives you a much broader context to help you use the tools that are the features in order to get great results. And I really, really see schema markup strategy and content strategy really, really being tightly interwoven together. So a couple of you introduced yourself saying that you work in content. Schema markup can be a guide for the elements of content that you want to include as you write it, in order to then make that authoring piece even easier, because you'll have kind of thought through that architecture of your article, thinking about sort of the important information to include. And even in our engagements, we often start off working a lot with the web teams and then end up becoming very close with the content teams as we sort of help them start thinking about those best practices in any type of content that they're writing. So I think I said you could do this on the back of an envelope. And so we have this chart that we use when we're doing strategy. And these columns are what I'm going to walk you through how to fill out, but more importantly, sort of what the questions we ask and the opportunities you can identify when you do this. And you'll notice we don't just start with Google feature. Google feature is the fourth step on this. We really talk about those key business concepts, or, what is the business about? Someone was talking about Halloween costumes in their introduction. It's like, well, what are the important things that you're selling? It's like Halloween costumes, maybe rentals, maybe other decorations. What are all those different elements of things that you want to do? And so what we're going to do is we're going to use the Minnesota Wild NHL website as our example tonight, because everyone's missing a little hockey right now, eh? I know I am. I cheer for the LA Kings, but don't tell any Canadians that. So key business concepts. So the question we're going to ask is, what are the important aspects of the business? What makes it unique? How does it make money? What do they need people to find? What do the customers ask? And then also, is there a strategic focus for the business? So if I put on my business owner hat, there's certain things as Schema App that we want to sort of move the dial on. Like, what are the things that are really strategic for 2020 that, may be different, that may surface different types of content or different elements that we want to different. So when we go to NHL.com, who, by the way, has no schema markup. Well, they have schema markup in a couple places. So, if anyone knows anyone, we should be like reaching out to them to help them with their schema markup. We can think about like, what are the key business concepts around this hockey team? And so it's the actual hockey team itself, it's their players, it's the games, it's the tickets, the news, the product, statistics. Now, there's a lot more on their website, but I was trying to, what are some of the things that we want to distill as like the most important things that we want to optimize and what we want to be found. Okay, so you kind of do your first brainstorm. Ideally, you're doing this with someone in the business that, if you're the business owner or someone else, so you can, ask those questions to, what is it that's most important? Is there a strategic focus? Maybe it's about recruitment right now. They're trying to get like all the hot stars that are sitting at home doing like workouts, or I don't know, has anyone seen that video where the kids are teetering on a balance beam, like practicing moving a hockey stick? Maybe there's something that's going on specifically that the business would know about. And once we have that key business concept, then we're going to ask the question of what is it? And we often joke at Schema App around some of the best people at Schema Markup are philosophers, because they're literally asking the question of what is this thing? And really, when they created schema.org, they were trying to define all different types of things. So we actually have a tree in Schema App that we like to use because it's sometimes easier to sort of see how things are organized than looking at schema.org, which I say reads like a foreign dictionary. So if thing is like the most generic, an organization, okay, well, it's not an organization, it's a sports organization. Oh, it's a sports team. So if we want to look within schema.org to say, what is the most specific class that we can look for? And just to make sure, I know there's some people who are new to schema markup on the phone. So schema.org is the vocabulary that we use in order to define things. And it was put together by Google, Yahoo, Yandex, Microsoft back in 2011. And they sort of describe these things called classes, and then the classes inform the type, which have then properties, and the properties are really things that we use to describe them. And so I'll use this word class in order to describe these different things in the business that we're then going to try to optimize. So if we then go through and think about the different, business concepts for the Minnesota Wild site and company, it's like the sports team, the players are people, the hockey games are sports events, the tickets are products, the news blog posting or news article, we could debate that. Merchandise or products. And the statistics was actually an interesting one, and I'm going to escape here. So, like this is, it's like, well, the statistics is data, right? So it's like, what should I call it? And then you can look at, it's like, well, is it it's not really a data set, because it's like, it could be a data set as a whole. And so I went into data set and I was like, well, I don't feel like it's a total data set. So let's go and look at data catalog. And so literally, as I was preparing this for all of you, I was actually asking that question. Now, something to note, that if there's like more specific things, you can see it actually like will be listed at the bottom here. So if I actually go into data feed, but what we want to do is like try to find, is there something in schema.org that helps describe it? And it's not always obvious. And this data feed one was like a really good example. So here I was trying to see like, oh, there's nothing data feed. There's nothing in there. What can we describe it? But there's report in here. That I was like, well, does it report? And then you can use sort of, a single feed providing structured information. The report type, you can look in here. And this is, a report generated by government or non-government organization. I was like, we're talking about hockey stats here. It's probably not that. This is often like, feel free to ping me on Twitter, DM me when you're like having these philosophical conversations. We have lots of these conversations at our company with regards to, what's the best way to do it. In sort of my synthesizing last night, we figured data feed was sort of the best way to do that. But you can see here, we're now moving from like the business concepts into some of the schema.org concepts. But again, not sort of just saying like, oh, what features can we get? But instead like, how do we actually describe that thing that the business is trying to have understood? All right, everybody still with me? I'm going to see virtual nods, see if I can see anyone here. Oh, everyone's off. Okay, hopefully everyone's having a drink, relaxing, enjoying it while we go through here. Okay, so the next step then is we ask, where is it on the website? Now, some of you may be thinking like, no, duh, Martha, like, of course it's on the website. You would be surprised how often, if you actually ask the business concept question or where their priorities are and the things that they're looking at, that there isn't one place that this is being described on the website. And I say one place because when you're actually having people do Google searches, one of the things that Google's going to try to figure out is like, what is the best page in order to serve to answer that question, or that defines that entity. And so if the answer is on multiple pages, it's really hard for Google to figure out like, well, what is then the best page in order to share? And I was looking recently at a SaaS business's website, and it's a relatively complicated software for accountants. And I literally like was like, I don't even know what page is actually talking about the primary software offering, because it was like the features were kind of broken out and so forth. So really this is like, isn't on a specific page. And if there are multiple pages describing it, what is like the main page that you really want to be the focal point for that key business concept? Okay, so if you have those, you can put them in here. And you'll see that sometimes, they're all under a nice category. So they're all under players. NHL is interesting where like all the players aren't just for Wild, it's where all the players live. Same as for the sports events. So you can then start seeing like, is the data organized in a way? So if we were to look for all the players, are they actually, is there some logic to the taxonomy as well, which then, is how is the information organized? Which again, structured data is all about sort of understanding and structuring things to promote understanding. Okay, so we now know that everything's organized. There are actual pages where a key concept is. If they're not, one page, think about what that one page is. Think about maybe consolidating it, so that there really is sort of one area that people can find that information. And then only now are we going to look at Google features. And what I like to do when I'm doing this is literally, instead of, we have sort of the list of key concepts. Now we're actually going to go through the whole list of features and ask if that kind of content exists or is relevant to the business. So articles through videos. I do recommend coming back to this often. It is changing. So you can see the ones that are in light gray. These are ones that have been what they call deprecated. So things like corporate contact and social profiles that used to put like, used to get for, or we try to get for sort of home pages or organization definitions, but there's new ones. So like data set's a new one in here, fact checked, image licensing metadata. So if you have a business that's very image rich, you can actually do licensing to Google for your metadata. Speakable still in beta. And then, the COVID announcement, anything here that has like this little box meaning it's in beta. And this list is really taken from Google's documentation. So I literally just sort of came in here and took the list. And so what you would do is then go through each of these. And it sounds like, something you can kind of do off the top of your head, but you would be surprised what might come up as something to be like, oh, actually we do that. Events is one that often it's like, oh, we host events, but it's not maybe something primary, but it's something we'd like to be found. Or, oh, we actually offer courses, for the things that you're doing. Oh, we do have reviews, but they're sort of in place, and I'm happy to answer questions on reviews if we need to. Videos, etc. So when you go through this list, you might actually go ahead and start adding things. So for example, here, we might have added, like they have highlights and a ton, they could totally take advantage of video object. Let's go through that process. Oh, they have ratings. Let's go ahead and add that piece. Oh, they have fact checks, around each of the players. Let's go ahead and add that. So really, I do recommend even someone, like I said, our team who does this all the time, we often come back here and sort of go through this and just make sure that we're fully now thinking not just about how we're making sure the content they're thinking of, but now also using the toolkit that Google's giving us to really maximize, how we can leverage things in search. All right, everyone's still with me. Now, what I've put in brackets here is like, look, FAQ might be a really good one to have on the organization, and the players also could have an FAQ, whereas today they don't have a Google feature. And so I also use this opportunity to kind of start thinking about strategy on the content of what's possible. I put here like, is data set the right, appropriate one that we can do here? And we'd have to dig deeper in to see if that's appropriate based on where that data is coming from. But even at this point now, we're starting to identify, oh, there's opportunities as we go through those features, in order to add additional content to the pages to help enrich, what that search result might look like. Okay. The last one we do, and I won't spend a ton of time on this, is rollout plan. And whether it be one of the women was talking about Drupal, looking for modules that are in there, WordPress if you have that, if you're on Shopify, there's add-ons there, BigCommerce, you name it. But we do tend to take rollout as a way of like, how do we what are the quick wins that we can get? And again, it's iterative, but we also look at like what's high value with low development cost. High value being it's really important for the business, while also being really good to get rich results, but also ideally not low, not a heavy lift with regards to your organization or to the development team that you're working with. So we often at this point then say like, are there pieces that are templated? What can we get out of the CMS? Now I did have a look on their site. They're using Google Tag Manager. It's not obvious what their CMS is. It looks custom built to me. I'm going to just assume they have WordPress for their blog, even though it wasn't coming up and built with, and that their products are in Google Merchant Feed for paid search. And then sort of what are your options? Now, I'm very spoiled because I run a Schema Markup company. So, we have things like our editor, but easy here could be like a generator, right? So what we would then do is say like, of these type of pages, and how many there are, what are some tools that we could use? A WordPress plugin in order to do your articles. And we do have a free WordPress plugin, Schema App does. So feel free to use that. It does some pretty nerdy automated things. Merchant feed, we automate off a merchant feed. So that one's pretty easy. And then we have our highlighter. Some of these things, might be a Drupal module, right? For the blogs, if you have Drupal, might be a Shopify plugin if you're doing that. So we do tend to like, what's the lift on implementation? And then really it's, about sort of looking at, what are you going to get the most robust kind of Google feature for with ease of implementation as a way of prioritizing it, and then sort of working through the harder ones over time. And it's really when we do this with all of our clients in order to get to like, what's our hit list? Like, what do we think, where should we start in order to start implementing Schema Markup in a way that's going to have an impact? So that's my, 12-minute, how do you do a strategy on a site, while sort of looking at the different elements, bringing in the business priorities, the opportunities within Google, as well as thinking about like the cost or ROI with regards to implementation. All right, maybe I'll pause here for a second. I see there's some pieces here in the chat. Looks like we have lots of live attendees. All right, everyone's with me. Woo woo. All right, how do we navigate schema.org? I feel, oh, SGN. Nice, someone caught my SGN. So how do we navigate schema.org? You know, it really is painful. And I say that, you know, from someone who spent a lot of time on it. You know, literally, like, we do a lot of searches. I'm very fortunate. Like in Schema App, we have this tree that we can actually look to see like all the different organizations and, you know, all the different types of medical extensions. But, you know, like one of the things, I'll look at local business with you and show you a couple just key tips when you're looking at this. So this description is very helpful. So we do often like read through here and sort of, you know, is this, you know, is this like explaining what it is that I'm trying to do? The other piece to note is like these are, you know, anything that's sort of not text in here, it expects to have something connected, and I'm about to go into some examples there for you. And so this is really saying like, you know, tell us what the address is, but use postal address in order to give us context of like, what's the street, what's the city. Now, if you scroll to the bottom, if you're new to Schema Markup and new to schema.org, the good news is that there's some examples down here. So you'll see here they often do examples like without markup, with microdata, RDFA, and JSON-LD. Spend your time on the JSON-LD. That's what Google recommends these days, although microdata is more like tagging, you can see within the page. So there's some good examples in here. You can also see they've been adding examples, which is really, really helpful. And then the other thing that's often at the bottom where I was looking for with the data feed is more specific types. And so if you're like, okay, it's a local business, but that's like really generic, you know, how do you actually come in here then and have a look? And, you know, again, this is where you're like, you know, construction. Okay, there's home and construction, and then you can kind of click on that one and then go through it. And so it's really, you know, as you become more familiar, you know, so here's more specific types of construction. As you become more familiar with schema.org, and then also, you know, I was at the Google documentation, it is good to kind of, you know, spend some time reading through these. You know, it's not always easy, but then there's a lot of kind people like my team who will write up like, let's us actually explain this in real words, what these things mean for you. And so there's a lot of guides on sort of like how to navigate that as you go through. And one of our values of Schema App is training and teaching and learning. So if you don't find it under our resources, you now know me and you can ping me and we will put it on our content development plan and build something to help you go through it. And that's part of who we are and what we do. Okay, so let's jump into connected schema markup. This is something I'm really passionate about, like to the point where I introduce myself with like my connected markup, you know, to go through that. And, you know, part of this is because like proper schema markup, like the whole reason Google's doing this is to understand the connections between certain things and how it relates to the web so that it can kind of crawl that knowledge graph to do inferencing and answer questions. And it's sort of based on this semantic technology that they're using to, you know, actually build what we call like knowledge graphs and ontologies like in Google that then power search. And I'm married to a semantic technologist, and like our whole business is based on semantic technology. So I think part of this is like my passion for how these things are connected is because like this is like how, if you do it in a connected way, your schema markup will have like a longer life because, you know, chatbots are starting to use this to do AI. Machine learning uses like this connectedness in order to do inferencing. There's just so many things that like I really see the schema markup as the foundation of that it's going to enable if we do it properly. So let me impart some of my wisdom on how to do it properly. So please don't put the same schema markup on every page. So like you know, some plugins put organization markup on every page. And, you know, the intent is like helping Google understand without question what a page is about. And so if all the pages are about the organization, we don't know what page is about the organization. So really, you know, going back to like our plan here, like what page is about what, and let's be really specific as to, you know, that primary type that we're going to use in order to explain what it is. The other piece is around not creating islands of schema markup. And I kind of wish I was sitting on that island right now instead of the cold weather here in Canada. Because if you connect them, your schema markup will start telling a story. And so you can see here, it's like there's the farm team, and then there's the main team in a hockey team, and they have articles that have videos and authors and products and events, and all these things are connected. And so, it turns out like NHL.com actually is like the site where all this is because they're the parent organization. And so if we wanted to kind of be able to kind of connect the dots back, the schema markup can help us do that. And so let's go back to the example that I had and talk a little bit about like how these things are connected. And then I'm going to go into some additional examples. So for each content type that we were looking at, how does it relate to the other things that were in the business? So if we were thinking about the blog posting, the blogs could be about a sports organization, a person, or a sports event. So if they're writing a blog about, the game that was played on this date last year that we all wish we were watching instead of watching Martha talk about schema markup about hockey teams, we could link it that way around the about, and about's a really nice strong connector, and I'll give you some more examples about that. Video object is about a sports event. The sports event organizer is the sports organization. So, this game against Minnesota Wild against the LA Kings is organized by the Minnesota Wild, or maybe it's NHL.com, which is that parent organization. Also, you can see that the product, so you can see here that the only way that you can link a product back to the organization is through this makes offer. And so you have to actually say, like the organization makes an offer of an offer and the item is offered by the product. Or, if it's in product, you can say it's like if it's produced by that organization, you can do it, but this is the only way to actually put like the price tied back to the organization. And then you can also use schema markup to identify relationships between things. So Minnesota Wild is actually in essence exactly the same thing as what Wikipedia is defining as Minnesota Wild. And I'm super excited because we're just starting to do some kind of entity semantic relationships within Schema App. And we're going to actually be linking like Google Knowledge Graph, Wikipedia, Wikidata through same as and about through sort of some of our tools to help sort of be absolutely clear about sort of the definitions of certain things and certain entities. So anytime I have a piece here, it's like I'm looking to kind of draw those relationships. And you really want to try to nest markup within the primary page. And I was thinking like there's, oh, here it is. Like it's sort of an easy way. So we use WordPress because I joke that we're lazy about doing schema markup on our own site. And so we use our own plugin and make our free plugin really awesome so we don't have to do any work. So here is our ultimate local business guide. I heard some of you are in local. This is actually being updated this month, and then I'll be presenting at Local U about some of the findings. So what I mean by this is, let's go back here. So this is a blog post. There's breadcrumbs also on this patient blog post. This blog post has videos, comments, and everything is nested. So you notice I don't have like aggregate rating as a separate line. I don't have video object as a separate line. I don't have, I don't know what I put comments on, but it's all nested. So the main thing this page is about is a blog posting, right, about the ultimate guide for local business schema markup. And then everything is nested below it. And I'll just show you an example. So like the author is nested here, the publisher, Schema App's actual company name is called Hunch Manifest. Surprise. The image, like the videos nested, and then everything about the video. So this is pulling in YouTube. Again, we automate it because we're lazy to pull in all that information about YouTube. And YouTube has the publisher on there. All of our comments are nested in here. Oh my goodness, it keeps going. Oh, it's about something. And then it also has an aggregate rating. And so like this is, like I always say, it's like the most beautiful nested schema markup because like Google knows that it's about a blog posting. It just has like all this other rich content under it in order to understand like, oh, this blog posting also contains all these other things that help us understand it and enrich that data and meaning. Not excited about this at all. Oh, I see a question. Is there a way to validate schema markup in Search Console? And then what's the effort of learning to add JSON markup yourself if you have a reasonable amount of familiarity with HTML and CSS? All right, so I think like you can learn how to do JSON-LD markup. Part of the question is like, do you want to be spending time writing that, especially if you're doing it at scale? I would say like spend some time learning how to build it dynamically through a tag manager or sort of in the page so that you can do sort of more templated pages. But there's, Google's endeavoring in some of their tools to teach you how to write that JSON LD. I think a lot of it, the concepts that I've covered now around how do you understand how the vocabulary works and how you need to connect things in order to nest things. And I'm going to give you a bunch more examples. If you can get your head around that, I feel like the JSON LD is not the hard part. Part of it's like actually understanding the concept of the fact that you're describing different things and the relationships between them. And then the other question, which I've already forgotten, is there a way to validate schema markup in Search Console? Yes. And so within Search Console, there's reports that specifically will tell you sort of, the validity of the schema markup. So how many errors, warnings are there or what's valid. And warnings are, really like you're missing a recommended field, and an error is you're missing a required field. Your actual code can be error-free, but still you'll get a warning or an error if you're actually missing specific elements of content. And that's, again, why you want to go back and look at adding that content then to those pages in order to satisfy that. And then under their performance reports, you can also look to see then how those rich results are performing under appearance. And in there, we can, I can switch to another deck at the end if we have time, and I can show you what that looks like. All right, keep the questions coming. So speaking of figuring out relationships between things, we have a free tool that my co-founder built because he was trying to figure out how to connect these things. And frankly, like going through schema.org is painful. And so he created this tool called Schema Paths. And in Schema Paths, you basically pick two different things from a dropdown. So it has the entire schema.org vocabulary. So in this key, we want to look at how do we link a sports team with an FAQ page, because we have our sports team and then we have all this great FAQ, but I'm not really sure how to link those together. And so we'll tell you the ways that you can link those together. So a sports team has property subject of, and then you can put your FAQ page. And because the page is primarily about a sports team, this is the best one we want to do because we want to lead with the sports team. Now, if the page was primarily an FAQ page, so let's say you have your whole wild site and then you have an FAQ page, but the FAQ is primarily about the organization, then you could say the page is an FAQ page and it's primarily about, and then link that to the sports team. And so you can pretty much link anything. So if we were trying to link a volcano with a gas station, these actually exist in schema.org. The volcano could contain the place, gas station, that might be a bit dangerous, or the gas station, could serve the area near the volcano. So there really, is no two things you can't connect with schema markup. There's just some that will be more restrictive, similar to what I was giving as the example of the organization. The only way to connect that to the price is through that makes offer. So really, I really encourage you as you do connected schema markup to use strong connectors. I really like about, mentions, subject of, and has part. So I gave you some examples with about. If you haven't seen John Krasinski's Some Good News, it's probably like one of my favorite things right now. I watch it with my kids on Monday mornings. So basically, John Krasinski, who's Jack Ryan, married to Emily Blunt, he's like doing his own news from his office at home, and his daughters have made like this fun sign, and he just talks about good news and then does something fun for someone. And so it's a news article about the YouTube channel Some Good News, so we could link that to the YouTube channel. It mentions John Krasinski, which is the same as the Wikipedia entry for John Krasinski. So here's, about and mentions and same as really good ways to link, a simple article that's, about a really fun show in this crazy time. I'll give you some other examples. So FAQs in organizations. We talked a little bit about sports organizations. This is a health organization that has FAQs specifically about them. It's done amazing performance. And so here the page is, FAQ, question and answers, and it has the organization. And so it's really an FAQ page. With FAQ, you have to do main entity with question and answers nested. And then, the publisher of the FAQs can be the organization or the author, or it can be about the organization. So really kind of tight ways that you can connect those together. Also, we're doing FAQ webinar tomorrow. I think I told everyone. So FAQs for products and services. So, your product and service can be the subject of an FAQ and then have sort of all the question and answers. If you have an aggregate rating, you can do a product and service with an aggregate rating that then is the subject of the FAQ. And then probably my favorite is collection page. There's different kind of lists, which is like a whole other webinar that we can revisit at another time. But collection pages are really interesting because it allows you to not only connect a lot of different things, but then also associate things to that collection page. So the collection page can be about something. So in this case, we made it about a product or a service. And this collection page has different parts. One of the parts is an FAQ page, which then has these main entities of questions and answers. And then it also has a part of a how-to. And what's really fun about these pages is that you can qualify for a how-to rich result as well as an FAQ rich result, but it's specifically about your product and service. And so these are just some, advanced examples of how you can do connected schema markup and really also leverage FAQ. So as you think of that schema markup strategy that we created, how do you perhaps on pages where you don't have a rich result today, kind of nest these things and connect them so that you have more of a chance of getting those results. Now, hot off the press, don't tell everyone this before my webinar tomorrow at 2 o'clock. But I wanted to share because I was just kind of excited. So we started pulling data. I think we have 88 different customers where data is being pulled into here because there's been lots of debate around FAQ driving less clicks or, with 0-click searches where the FAQ result has all the information in it. Are we going to get no clicks, going through? And so we decided to look at what the click-through rate was across different appearances of search. And this is through Search Console. Over a 6-month period because we want to do a longer period because of COVID. We didn't want to kind of use that as sort of, want to go beyond. And it kind of lands in the middle. So it's interesting because it's like, it's not as great. So rich results are kind of eventually going away in Search Console. These are sort of almost being deprecated in some accounts. But, event details, web lite results, videos, product results, job details. There's also job listing. And then here's, review snippets, and then FAQ rich results. There's all these other kinds that are worse, for these 88 different clients with a ton of data over 6 months. So we're going to continue to try to pull this kind of data to, use data to inform, should you use FAQ, for example, as a way to enrich, let's go back to it, our, strategy that we came up with, for the Minnesota Wild. The answer is yes. Like it's a viable strategy that you can use in order to, help those pages get, higher click-through through search, even though some of those answers might be directly in search results. All right, I'm coming to the end here. If everyone's still with me. All right, so key takeaways. Do the strategy for the business and then optimize for features. Instead of just thinking of schema markup as doing strategy for features, you're going to identify more connections, more opportunities, and also make sure that you're really aligned to those key business goals if you start with the business and then build it out. And hopefully that kind of 5-step process will help you do that more quickly, especially as you get used to schema.org and trying to figure out what things are. The other piece is create connected schema markup so that you can really nest the schema markup underneath that key concept that you're trying to do so that it's absolutely clear to the search engines and to the other machines that are going to be reading your schema markup exactly what the meaning is. And the FAQs aren't so bad after all, that they're actually a good strategy that you can use in order to find features and enhance the search results for things that maybe don't qualify. That's me. I am usually active on Twitter. I find these days with my 6 different jobs at home, I'm not as active as I'd like to be, but I do try to reach it. I also welcome emails if you want to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to do that either on my email or LinkedIn. So that's what I prepared for us today. What questions does everyone have? All right, we got another one here.
Thank you so much, Martha. I've been documenting them, so I can just read those out. And then, so for those of you who have asked questions, if you want to follow up, just type your message in the chat and then I can read that as well. So we'll start with David Erickson's question. He asks, what are your thoughts on schema for podcasts and audio? What are your thoughts on how that first question.
Okay. So Schema, I haven't done a ton of stuff on podcasts. In fact, it's actually on our list for, I get my team to treat Schema App as its own company. So it's on my customer success managers list to do for our podcasts. But they do have a feature here for podcasts. Let's get in here. Oh, I'm not lying. There is a podcast one. I'll find it on here. Does anyone see it? I'm like looking. There is one for podcasts and maybe under video. I will double check and figure out where it is. But they have done. Oh, maybe it's under Google Podcasts here. But like they do have Schema Markup for podcasts. I haven't tried it directly, and we're using it on a couple of our client sites to just see sort of what we see for findability. But it is. I'm not seeing it directly on the list, but it is in here, probably embedded under one of these. If anyone wants to jump in and sort of pieces, I think it's under broadcast here and how you pull it in. But I haven't seen directly how it's impacted us specifically or our clients as of yet. But it's something that we're looking at. Video clips is another one that how do we start getting like certain clips and managing sort of how those show up.
Thank you so much. And then David's second question was, what are your thoughts on how Schema influences getting content visibility in Google Home?
Good question. So I'm going to share evidence I know of how it's influencing it, and then we'll go from there. So last May, for the first time, Google sort of announced that they were using structured data in order to basically allow your content to be found across search engines and voice search. And they named specifically Google Assistants for that. And then they sort of went in and announced like the FAQ and how-to schema markup specifically. And what's interesting about FAQ is it lends very nicely to voice, right? You're structuring things to give a question and an answer. And so, from that, again, we haven't done a ton of, I'll say, like, I don't have hard data saying like we've seen this impact on Google Assistant because it's really hard to measure. And in fact, John Mueller has been talking quite a bit about, just look for search on voice as part of like your search queries, like within Search Console. And they haven't called out specifically like things through Assistant. And they haven't really, I would say, lent to saying when they were going to do that. But you can even see here, like Discover, like we've seen structured data help specific blogs be found on Discover. And so, one piece is that we have seen Google state that it's supported and it helps with Google Assistant. It's really hard to measure. And so I wish I could say like, oh, I have this like great way for you to measure it so that you can say that it has this direct input. To me, how to recipes, piece, but FAQ makes the most sense. And then Speakable has been in beta for a long time. So if you come here, like it's primarily looking at, what sort of XPath content locator. So, how do you identify a portion of the page in order to be used, through the Google Assistant app, right? So like, this is one very specifically to say, what phrase are they going to use? I don't know if we ask a lot of questions around random animal trivia at our house. I have my 4 and 6 year old. So, is there sort of a segment that you would want specifically kind of pulled out for that? So I do see strong indications that we're going to see more movement towards them identifying structured data strategies for Google Assistant. I just think right now it's really hard to measure. They haven't given us great tools for that.
Perfect, thank you. Next question is from S. Steinbring. Where can we find examples of the different types of rich results you can achieve with Schema Markup? It's sometimes difficult to sell clients on the why to implementing Schema Markup.
Absolutely. So one thing is that if you actually come into, so I'm in developers.google.com. And if you go under case studies, so this is one that I tend to use as just like high level messaging. Now we have our own case studies and our own examples, but it's like, you don't have to believe me. Like you can look here and depending on, like they talk about how to markup in here, job postings, job ratio, again with this, like they talk about conversion rate. So there's some actually like pretty detailed, good examples in here. And what's good is that like these last two have been added in the last like 6 to 8 months. So they're like Google is adding to these case studies. And I don't know if they actually, let me just have a look. Yeah, so they're actually like giving some hard data. Let's go look here. I haven't looked at this lately. Let's just see if they have a picture. Nope, they don't have a picture on here. So for pictures, you're going to come back to the guides and the reference. So within each of these different features here, they usually give like an actual visual example of the different pieces. And then also they have a, if I can find it, they actually have like a enhance your search with structured data, explore the search gallery. And so if you're actually looking for sort of all in one place, you can find a lot of these here. What I often do is, you can start here and then, it's like, well, if you're working in a certain industry, how do you start doing some searches to, for these types of things and find then specific examples that you can illustrate. Often we do that sort of like when we do a competitive analysis, let's say for banks or for consulting firms and so forth. And then we'll sort of pull in examples out of search, for those different features for those different types of organizations. But these are being pretty well maintained. Oh yeah, one other thing that someone was asking about, like learning how to write JSON-LD. The Structured Data Code Lab is actually something they built in order to help people learn this. And so that's sort of another resource under here. Again, it's just the guide, develop your search presence, and then the reference are where I find like the two most helpful things.
Martha, those are super helpful resources. Thank you so much for sharing those. Next question is from Christian AM. Could you use same as to solidify connections between 4 different brands, each with its own site, but that are all managed by one silent primary organization?
I probably wouldn't use same as for that. I would probably use parent organization for that. The word that sort of jumps out to me is when you said silent. So often, if they're silent, they may not want to be known that they're there. But let me just go show you what it looks like. So if we go into organization, so this is like a good, parent organization. So if I were to go here, let's look at a visual first, and I'll show you the code. So here, if let's say, I was saying, Minnesota Wild, and the parent organization, based on the website, I know there's other people who own it, like is NHL.com, or the farm team. I don't know who's Minnesota Wild's farm team. Do you guys know what it's called?
I don't.
Okay, well, with a farm team, like that also is tied to it.
Every
and so,
high school in Minnesota.
every high school in Minnesota, hey, yeah. So if you come here, oh, Iowa Wild, there we are. Sweet, someone knew it. I knew it. See, we got some hockey fans. All right. So, and then if you go into organization, so here there's parent organization. And so, like the same as is like if it's exactly the same as, right? So if they're 4 different brands, they're not the same, right? Like those 4 aren't equivalent to each other, but they share a parent organization. So the appropriate property would be to use parent organization and then define that parent organization, perhaps like on the About Us page, like it's like Schema App is the brand and the parent organization's Hunch Manifest in our case. So somewhere on the website, do they describe that organization, and that would be the appropriate place to point them on the parent organization.
Thank you so much for sharing. So we are at 7:30. Are we okay to do? We have 2 more questions left.
Do it. Yeah, I'm good.
Let's
Okay.
do them. Yeah.
I've got 2 more sips of my smoothie. We're good.
So we have a question from Christy Reed. Is it better to have a dedicated page or include specific FAQs nested in pages?
Ooh, good question. I think like my answer is going to be it depends. Part of it depends on the organization, and also like what search terms. And this is sort of where Schema Markup is like one of your strategies in your bigger toolkit for SEO. So for example, we do work with SAP, and we've nested FAQs under what is ERP because we want them to rank for that what is ERP, but then sort of get some broader search engine result, like literally real estate in order to kind of jump that out. So in that case, like we wouldn't want that all to be on an FAQ page, because we actually want to use that tool to kind of get that real estate sort of under that certain rich result. The other piece would be like, if it's like something more specific, so it's like I want to do FAQ about an organization, it might lend that those should all be on one page, because you're not going to put them on the home page, but like there's a page that's talking specifically about a topic that has lots of FAQs, similar to what I showed as the example with admin health. So I think it depends on what that what your goal is with that page, and sort of where you need the tool to kind of get that broader search result. And it may not, for the organization, the homepage is going to rank for that. You might not need it as a tool there, but for example, on a more generic term, you might want to use it. And I have seen it actually work really well on, like, if you have category or local pages. So it's like for something in Minneapolis, and then you have, it's almost like one of those collection pages where you have lots of information about it, and then you can use FAQ. Like, that's a brilliant way to kind of, again, just like expand that real estate on the page.
Awesome. Thank you, Martha. And the last question of the night is from Jeannie Hill.
Oh no, she asks hard ones.
First of all,
here comes
she
the
said,
curveball.
Awesome webinar, Martha. So got a little compliment there. And then she asked, in your Google Search Console study, did you parallel it with the types and percentage of schema types implemented during the 6 months?
So not yet. No, this is like a first pass at some of the data in order for us to say, like, just like on a broad scale, are we seeing it? There's lots of ways that we're going to be able to cut this data in the future. So like by industry, by depth of markup, how long the markup's been there, et cetera. So no, this is a first pass at, on a broad scale, sort of assuming that it's, they're equally implemented. It's our client, so we know that the schema markup on it is accurate and complete, but we haven't sort of gone into sort of cut the data in other ways. But open and welcome suggestions on how we want to do that. We're really endeavoring this year to kind of broaden our work and how we're looking at what kind of schema markups performing for what industries, so that we can start making really informed data-driven recommendations on sort of how deep do you go, how broad do you go, what type of content actually performs and how. And so, really getting to the point where we can use the structured data in order to influence strategy with data. So good question, Donna. We'll get deeper into it soon.
Fantastic. Awesome. So those were all of the questions that we had here tonight. And so really appreciate it. Martha Van Berkel, thank you so much for being our speaker. We really appreciate it. Everybody, round of applause. I know everybody's been switched to attendee mode, but like we can feel your presence. And so loud claps, loud.
Well, I'm just bummed I just don't get to come hang out with you there, but we'll have to do that another time.
It's starting to get really nice here too. It's starting to get pretty nice.
It's supposed to be warmer here tomorrow. We've been waiting for spring to arrive for a while.
I think we might have had our first 70-degree day here, Fahrenheit, the other day, which was like beautiful. I got a little bit of sunburn on the top of my head, which is the indicator of when.
Was that on Saturday? I think that was the day I got sunburned because I was out.
I think it was, yeah.
21. We haven't hit 70 yet. We're still waiting for that.
Oh man, I tell you what, we really need it because everybody's sitting there at home, and in Minnesota too. It's kind of, it hit, I think, people in northern and maybe you can relate, but in colder climates, I think it hit this whole shelter in place hit us harder because springtime is when we get to come outside. We've already been sheltering
tell me about
it for like 6 months. We're tired. We need to get out. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I tell you what, it's great. It's great that you're able to join us, and I think it gave me like at least another like 50% stamina for how long I could do this sort of shelter in place thing, because it just like lifted my spirits and gave me all sorts of new things I want to do here, sit down at my desk and work on from a schema perspective. So thanks again my pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and so just a little bit more for us before we adjourn here tonight. I'm going to share my screen again. I don't want to forget, we have MnSearch Summit. As we mentioned earlier on in the show, we're going to be moving this year's summit from June 19th, 2020 to next year, Friday, June 18th, 2021. That'll be at the River Center. We've confirmed with most of our speakers that they will be available. Some of them can't quite commit yet because it's way, way far ahead. But most of them have said, yes, we're going to be there. And for the ones that can't make it, we're going to fill their slots with people that are just as impressive, just as informative. And so for the people who have purchased tickets, you don't need to do anything. It's done. You're set. You just show up next year and everything's going to be taken care of. For the people who want to buy tickets, they're up, they're out there. You can go and buy them, and we will have your seat ready for 2021. In the unfortunate event that you don't want to come next year, you can't come next year, and you do have tickets, let us know. We'll take care of that. We'll make sure that you're not like set back or anything like that. But that's kind of, those are kind of like three options I think that we've heard of so far. But we'll take care of things. We're adjusting to things the best we can. So that's next year for MnSearch Summit. Make sure that you are putting it on your calendar now, going to your boss, telling them that this is the type of educational opportunity that you want to pursue. See if they'll pay for it. Be that kind of high ROI education and networking opportunity right here in the Twin Cities. That'll be live in person next year. You can like come up to me, I'll shake your hand, give you a hug, if it's allowed at the time, and if we're all cool with that. Like if all of the things are in place, handshake. We'll make it happen. Great. Well, and that's all we have here tonight. Join us again next month. Tune in. It'll be the same approximate time frame. It'll be May 27th, the fourth Wednesday of every month. That's how you know when it's going to be an MnSearch event. We're going to have Nava Hopkins with us. She's going to be talking about paid search, really amazing talent, and she'll be joining us virtually, and it'll be a great event once again. So if you had a good time here tonight, please tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your MnSearch or people that you know in Minnesota, but also outside of Minnesota. As evidence here tonight, we are now an international organization with the best darn search content in the world. And this was a pleasure for us to be able to put on for you tonight. So if you have comments, let us know. We're the board at mnsearch.org. You can email us. We also have Abby, Carrie, Brandy, help me. Do we have a survey for tonight? Or should we just have folks email us directly?
Email us directly tonight.
Okay, just email us directly tonight at board@mnsearch.org. And the last thing we'd like to do, just out of appreciation for our speaker once again, Martha, what's the best way that people can get a hold of you? Maybe your website, your Twitter, your LinkedIn profile. What's your Venmo in case people want to send you money for thanks? Just like
we don't have Venmo in Canada, but I did my first Uber Eats this week, so I'm learning and evolving through this COVID time. So happy to get an email. So Martha@schemaapp.com, Twitter Martha Van Berkel, LinkedIn Martha Van Berkel. So find me on any of those. If you like to chat, LinkedIn or Twitter are great for DMs, or feel free to send me a note directly. And then tons of resources for learning on our website. I was showing you like under resources. So that's where you find that Schema Paths tool, which is free. You can also just Google Schema Paths. And then just tons. There's podcasts on there I've been on talking about how to do all the kinds of different things. And then if you want to learn more about FAQ, although I gave you a little bit of a preview of some of the stuff tonight, that's going on tomorrow.
Perfect. And will this slide deck that you shared tonight, will this be available on that page that you mentioned?
Correct. Yeah. So this will get, actually a lot of this I can send to you as well, or I can post that in SlideShare if that's helpful. And then also we can, I usually just like post it on the site as well, so you can find it there.
That's great. That's awesome. So for those of you that were writing down and are already on your way to the resources that Martha mentioned, good on you. If you weren't because you had your hands were busy, let us know, board@mnsearch.org. We will hook you up with the information and make sure that you are well educated and well connected with the information that you saw here tonight. So once again, thanks again everybody for joining us. And please consider joining us again next year, next month, and then becoming a member, and then also next year's summit. I guess we're going to sign off now. So this is how we do this? Is it the end of a Zoom call? Okay, bye everybody.
That's when we sing a song.
It's the MnSearch.org show starring Martha and Josh and Abby and Carrie, who hasn't moved in a long time. Oh wait, that's her picture.
All right. Night night.
Take care, everyone. Bye bye.